Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Never After All Readings. I am your host, Never After All. Please pull up a chair, grab a hot cup of hot cocoa, and sit back for another reading. Today's reading will be Just Words by Device Heretic. Description is as follows. Twilight breaks Celestia's doors, but then you'd be mad too if your stupid brother got drunk and told you you were adopted. The one and only chapter, The Underlying Truth. Princess Celestia paused momentarily as the guards outside her study began shouting. They were guards. Shouting is more or less what they were there for, when all was said and done. The truth, painful as it was to admit, was that she was old, although she preferred, on the overall, to say that she had been around for a long time, and that over the centuries she had gotten quite good at telling one sort of shouting from another. There was, for example, the brief bark of alarm at a toy under a hoof at night, or, in contrast, the long, drawn-out, ongoing peril, like going over a waterfall, or being chased by a gigantic, out-of-control chicken. Life in Equestria was strange and exciting. There was a lot to notice. Every day, it seemed, she was stuck with something to... It seemed that life in Equestria was strange and exciting. There was a lot to notice. Every day, it seemed that she was stuck with something new to observe and catalog in her vast repertoire of her memory. This shouting, however, was familiar. To be perfectly honest, not entirely unwelcome. The guards were shouting, but in a strange, half-hearted way that suggested they were doing so more in hopes that they wouldn't be suspected of being unwilling to do so later than because they thought it would have any effect whatsoever. There was no anger or reckless defiance in their voices, as you might hear if they were, say, standing proud before an overpowering foe. No, these were the shouts of guards who weren't entirely sure they knew what they were supposed to do. The princess had given them orders that she wasn't to be disturbed for this evening, but on the other hoof, Celestia smiled. On the other hoof, there was nothing like Twilight Sparkle stomping at them to get the guards nervous. It was bad enough they had saluted her brother every time he walked past, but heavens alone knew what was going to get her angry enough to demand an audience with the princess. Celestia resumed reading the somewhat tedious report on the Griffin Court politics and waited for her doors to slam open. Only when they did, and after Celestia took a little private moment of pride in the tremendous surge of power she felt from her most faithful student, did she look up. "Good evening, Twilight," she said, a very appearance of pleasure. "You seem to have dislodged my paintings." Twilight stood in the doorway, panting furiously. Behind her, two guards gave Celestia sheepish grins of apology, and indeed the paintings on the wall now hung crooked on their hangers. "Oh, don't good evening me!" Twilight roared, but her horn lit, and the paintings behind her righted themselves. She stomped forward, the door slamming shut behind her. "It has been a terrible evening." "I'm sorry to hear that, of course," Celestia said, pushing the scroll from her agent at the eerie side and patting the ground next to her before the fireplace. She raised an eyebrow when Twilight stood her ground, and continued. "I know you were looking forward to this evening's little get-together. You get to see your family so rarely." "That's just it," Twilight moaned. Celestia's heart froze, but long practice kept her face pleasant as it had been when Twilight had entered. "What's just it, Twilight?" Twilight's eyes blazed with indignant rage. "They're not my family." Celestia opened her mouth to speak. "Please, someday she'll need to learn the truth. But only when she's ready." And closed it again, sighing heavily. "Ah," she said. "You found out, then?" Twilight recoiled. You knew I was adopted?" Celestia closed her eyes, knowing very well that what she was about to say would be just as bitter as a pill to swallow as there was. "Of course I did, Twilight. I talked to your parents about it when—" "They're not my parents," Twilight raged. but she quickly mastered herself, closing her eyes, mouth tight, giving off a strained, angry sound of stifled words she knew better than to say. After a moment, she sighed and turned away from Princess Celestia. I am glad you have the presence of mind not to say too many foolish and impulsive things to me, Celestia said, not entirely pleasantly. But since I'll have to replace at least one hinge on my doors, I suspect I am getting the tail end of your reaction to the news. Twilight was silent for a while, staring the princess down as best she could, which was to say, not at all. She was deflated. A little bit, and now her fury had broke on the sea wall of Celestia's calm. Celestia patted the ground next to her and gave Twilight a very small smile. The unicorn trotted up next to her mentor and snuggled up against the warm white bulk, as if it were 2 decades earlier and she was a little filly again. There were some things that would humble even some pony as proud and mature as Twilight, after all. The princess hummed at the touch and draped a wing around Twilight gently. "How did you find out, Twilight?" she whispered. "Shining Armor got drunk," Twilight sulked. She laid her head down and began scraping a hoof back and forth across the rich carpeting in front of the fireplace, apparently fascinated by the way the fine woven patterns moved when she did so. Cadence told us she was pregnant, and he was laughing with Mom and Dad, like, "Oh yeah, I was such a good example from you, Dad. Although you adopted Twilight when I was 5 or something like that." Twilight huffed. "I suppose you know about Cadence already, too." "Well, to be perfectly honest, I was the one who told her she was pregnant, so yes, I did," Celestia said, chuckling. Twilight huffed out something that might have been a bitter laugh, but otherwise didn't react. Well, you know how it is, Twilight. She was visiting Luna, and I had happened to sense the growing life in her. I had asked if she had been to the doctor lately. A grandful for them. A real grandful," Twilight said bitterly. "Not that I'm in any place to have much foals anyways. Spike will lay an egg himself before I find some pony to settle down with, I swear." Celestia shrugged. "Stranger things have happened. Giant chickens, for example." "I know when some pony is trying to humor me, Princess. Not now, okay?" Twilight grumbled. She ran her hooves through the fine carpeting a couple more times, huffing. The princess cocked her head slightly. What did they say to you?" Twilight raised her head, having the grace to appear a little guilty. "I didn't give them a lot of time to say much. They confirmed it was true, and then I started shouting." She turned to Celestia, her face a portray of misery. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It wasn't my place to—" "Oh, don't give me that," Twilight snarled, raising her hooves, shrugging off the gentle embrace of Celestia's wing. She began pacing back and forth before the fireplace. "Of any pony, I could have taken this from you. Celestia said nothing. Twilight prowled back and forth, muttering half-sentences of explicitives under her breath. "At least from you it would have been removed from things," Twilight said eventually. Celestia raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I'm happy to know that you would want to hear unpleasant news from me. It suggests an unfortunate trend. I've put enough hardship on you as it is, in the years we've been working together." Twilight gave the princess a sour look over the shoulder. "That's not what I said." "No, it's what I'm saying, Twilight," Celestia replied, waving a hoof irritably. "I care about you, very much. You've always been my friend, as well as my student. You know that. But ever since you went to Ponyville, our relationship has been strained. I can't just pull you away from your studies for a meal alone together now and again, or bring tea to the tower unannounced. Sometimes I worry that all that's been left to us has been the work and the huge responsibilities I've trusted you with. I don't want my voice to become the taskmistress. Twilight, I really don't." Silence. "I'm sorry," Twilight whispered, staring out the window. Thank you for saying so, Celestia said, a little more gently. I did not like keeping this secret from you, but I respected that your parents had the right to tell you when they thought the time was right. Twilight turned, a harsh rebuttal on her tongue, but Celestia cut her off with a severe frown. If you even dream of saying something foolish like, "They're not really my parents, Twilight," I will be extremely disappointed in you. But they're not, Twilight said. She was trying not to whine, but Celestia could tell. The painful moan of denial leaked in with the seams of her self-control, sweating from every little pore that the statement had. Celestia sighed. A productive thought occurred to her. Twilight, breathe with me. What? Twilight turned, her expression disbelieving. What, like when I was a little Phil? Precisely. Now lie here. There you are. Celestia gave Twilight's reductive frown a bright smile, just as she had from that very first lesson out of the Vendera. Now close your eyes, with me, in and out, in and out, in and out. Celestia opened her eyes and looked over Twilight's features. It seemed that her teacher voice still had some sway. Twilight was dutifully focusing on the exercise. The lines of stress that had made her poor student look careworn and hurt were nowhere to be seen. A tear fell, though. Instinct prodded Celestia, and for once she didn't even consider resisting as a hoof ran along Twilight's cheek, wiping away the tear. The unicorn whined in the back of her throat and sniffled. I am so sorry. You weren't ready to hear this yet. Certainly not from my stupid breath from Shining. When he's drunk, Twilight sniffed again. I just love them so much. They've always been. They were my parents, but... Celestia consciously let the silence after Twilight trailed off linger for a while, since doing so would make her point without the necessity of actually speaking. But what? It hurts just to think that I am not really their little filly, Twilight finished lamely. She looked away from Celestia, who smiled in a not very amused sort of way. That I'm not really there? Not to be rude, Twilight, Celestia said, putting a hoof on one of Twilight's. But that's not what's bothering you at all. You know better than that. Do I? Twilight asked. Celestia sighed, but her expression quickly recovered into a slightly mischievous grin. I hope so. If you really think, and forgive me for this, please, if you really think that the measure of who is truly your family has to do with much as the mare that had the privilege of squeezing you out between her thighs... The princess laughed as Twilight's face scrunched up in alarm. What? You see, that's my point, Celestia said, raising her hoof to her mouth to stifle a giggle. We are more than the simple realities of biology, Twilight. Ponies are social creatures. We welcome others from our family by choice all the time. For example, Cadence is part of your family now, isn't she? Twilight nodded. But the truth, and please forgive my presumptuation, is that marrying Shining Armor only made it legal. She was already part of your family. Yours, Twilight Sparkle specifically. She was your big sister before she was ever your sister-in-law, just like Rarity is Sweetie Belle's. That you are not yourself also Luna's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter is irrelevant to the reality of the love you two share. That is my understanding anyways. More or less, Twilight mumbled. Not that I'd say that to her face. That's a one-way trip to Awkward City. Celestia smiled. I appreciate that it's a little difficult to phrase well, yes. But you are aware, Twilight, it is once more common to say that sort of thing between friends. When I was young, your age, relatively speaking, I was adopted into one of the great unicorn clans of the time, and so was Luna. We're not actually sisters, of course, since we weren't born in the conventional sense, but we are clan sisters. I had hundreds of clan siblings, most of whom were totally unrelated to another by blood. But that's just how things were back then, and we were all one big group, you see, one big family. Twilight frowned. I've read about that, I guess. I don't think that's what you and Luna ever meant by sis? No, Twilight. Luna is my sister. She has been my friend, and yes, my clan sister for centuries. We have walked many great roads together, many paths apart, and only to come together again. So we are sisters, by choice. That she and I do not share at least a parent is irrelevant. What I was getting at is that the customs about what your family is and is not change over time, and more importantly, are ultimately decided by you personally. I have been fortunate to experience this phenomenon for myself over my life. Look, I see where you're going with this, Twilight said. She rolled her eyes, putting a sarcastic sing-song tone in her voice. Twilight Twinkle and Nightlight and Shining Armor have always loved me, and in fact choose to love me if I were their own daughter. I should be grateful. They're actually my real family, and I'm not acknowledging their sacrifices for some pony they didn't have. Well, I plan to stop there, certainly, but only on the way to somewhere else. Celestia gave her favorite student a wary look. As you so elegantly expressed, it is not very satisfying for you, and would be a little more condescending of me just to say at you, I think, since I doubt you'd care to hear it. Twilight huffed through a grin. You might say that, yeah. But that's where I'm getting at, Twilight. You don't actually feel disconnected from them at all now, even though you feel like you ought to. Celestia reached out, pressed a hoof against Twilight's chest, smiling as the unicorn clutched it gracefully. It is the betrayal, the sudden knowledge that tempts you to reevaluate everything, even though there is really nothing that requires it. You know they love you, and you love them. That's all that matters. It's the hurt. It changes some things, yes, but not the underlying truth. Twilight stared up at her, peering deep into the princess's eyes as if hoping to read some secret message in their depths, searching for some hint that Celestia wasn't being completely straightforward with her. It occurred to Celestia that Twilight might have learned this little game from the princess herself, and that it might work on some random sun pony pulled off the street. But the plain truth of it is that Twilight would have to at least get up pretty early in the morning to get one over on Celestia. She might as well not go to sleep in the first place. This was Celestia's game. She owned the board, the pieces, and the rules. Twilight only saw a gentle, loving smile. A genuine one, but still, that's all there was. 1,000 years of composure shows only what it wants you to see. Celestia passed the time reflecting on how Twilight's eyes were so much like her own, something she always found pleasant. Finally, Twilight sighed. What happened to the days when you could just hold me in your wings, let me scream and yell and be angry, and then, I don't know, solve everything with a neat phrase? The princess pursed her lips. You turned 13. To her relief, this got a laugh out of Twilight. A little bitter, yes, but a real laugh of genuine amusement. Yeah, I guess. If you want me to lie to you and say that this is a simple thing that will just go away after a week or so, like that time you pre-ordered a copy of Daring Do in the Lost Canyon and was claimed by somebody who had stolen your reservation slip, well, I won't do it. Celestia chuckled, reaching out with a hoof on Twilight's chest, gently tugging on Twilight so that the unicorn scooted towards the loving embrace. I don't, Twilight. I know this will be hard on you. It will change the rest of your life, obviously. I only hope insofar that you know the fact and accept that it changes very little, but even that it is something. I was going to say, I know the things that you said are probably right, but they're not what I want to hear, Twilight said, nuzzling Celestia's neck. It's a very foal-like thing to do, but Twilight was very hurt after all. Celestia admired the unicorn's courage in displaying the hurt so openly, and, further, felt a little thrill of pride burn in her chest at the trust it implied. Celestia bent down and gently kissed Twilight's forehead. If this had happened when you were younger, I would have been a little less confrontational. But you're a grown mare, and you know very well the hurt will stop when the wounds are treated. not by being told that this looks like it hurts a lot. Twilight reached up with her hooves, sniffling and clutching herself tightly to Celestia. Thanks. Take you and I, for example, Celestia said. Am I your friend? Your mentor? And what are you to me? Merely a friend? Merely a student? Are you my... I cannot keep her. Nightlight frowns. Oh. What? Why not? But he clearly doesn't understand what I just said. Not completely. His wife does, the mare who, in a happier world, would have been the precious daughter's aunt. Her now dead father's sister understands my intent. It is something communicated in glances, or their absence. In a way, I arrived in the dead of night, accompanied by no pony. Twilight Twinkle stares at me, and I can tell that somewhere deep down, even her great-heartedness is unwilling to forgive me for what I am doing. She is a traditional mare in her way, and she has old-fashioned ideas, even in my mind, and practical ideas that, for all their pretense towards nobility and gentility, are inconvenient and will cause more hurt in the end than she realizes. That is fine. I have endured the hatred of beings she cannot even comprehend, and yet that my old friend feels me pathetic grates me more than the raw, bloodthirsty rage of Discord at his worst, or the imperious, dreadful malice of Nightmare Moon. It is not a blow that will be deflected. It is a sting, a rash, an irritant, a reminder for that all my power. Tonight she finds me weak and small. I can yet see it in her eyes. A mother, pressed by circumstance, may be the right to give her a foal into the care of those who are more able. But no mare should ever try to exile the foal from her life as it never had existed. But I am doing it for her. I loved her father. Perhaps only a young shining armor loved his uncle as much as I. I have known many loves over my long life, but this one was tainted by inevitable tragedy. I should have shut my heart to him, but he was so kind, so gentle, so giving, even in his last days, a true paragon. I know, we all knew, that his illness was going to take a good pony for the world well before his just time, and that I could not bear to think he would go into the fields beyond the waking eye without leaving something of himself for me to hold and love. And so I broke my ancient vow, made in the hopes of preventing more arguments and bloodlines and unicorn aristocracy than there already were, and allowed myself to become pregnant. I was so foolish. I let myself hope, and hope is the first step to the path of disappointment. When I made the decision, I thought things would be all right. Yes, my foal will lose her father early on, but she will know him long enough to know that he was good and strong and noble and that he loved her. She will have many years with him, a decade at least. As long as my daughter lives, I will curse the winter. I will curse the bitter northern winds and sickness it blew into my beloved's vulnerable lungs, snuffing out those last few precious years, stealing him from us as his daughter still grew within me. Our beautiful daughter, Twilight Sparkle. I turned to Nightlight, trying to convey with half-hearted smiles and reluctance I do not feel. I am the princess of the sun, monarch of Equestria. I cannot provide for Twilight the way she deserves. I cannot be the mother she needs. You have been absolutely ridiculous about this whole affair, Celestia, Twinkle snarls. I pause, shocked. It is the first time she has spoken to me since her brother died 6 months ago. Hate is never something I ever thought I'd hear on the tongue of Twilight Twinkle, and certainly not directed at me. Not anger, not peevishness or anxiety or hate, deep and abiding, permanent. A grudge, nursed over years, unspoken. Like wine, it had grown rich and intoxicating over years being hidden away. She waves her hoof irritably. Hiding your pregnancy, hiding your relationship with my brother. I can't imagine you didn't know he wanted to marry you so very badly because he loved you. I do, I snapped. I very well know, and... I hesitate. Should I tell her? Will it serve any purpose but to hurt every pony, myself not least among them? But I spared the decision. You didn't, Twinkle snarls. Tell me that even you wouldn't be so foolish, so vain as to marry a pony lying on his deathbed. I said nothing. But that into itself was a response. Twinkle leans over the table, glaring at me as if I am the most worthless, pathetic creature she has ever seen. You disgust me. It is only for the sake of that poor foal in the next room that I do not throw you out of the house this instant. Humiliation. I am being talked down by a mere 30-year-old. It must be something about the family. He could always render me speechless, too. I wonder if Twilight will. But no, of course she won't. That is the point. I sigh. What should I have done, Twilight Twinkle, as your brother lay dying? Should I have denied him the last little token of my love? You should have married him years ago, Twinkle roars, slamming a hoof down on the table. I regret so much introducing him to you. He saved our lives that first night, both of us, you and I, and lost his own in the end. Lost it mooning after a dream where the two of you would be happy together, openly. And the worst for me is that was even a dream for you, Celestia. He thought you were lonely on the throne. All he wanted was to make you feel loved. She narrowed her eyes and sneers. Idiot colt, he always was. But you're worse, for taking advantage of somebody who didn't let himself see that you were just humoring him. I cannot help myself. I lose my temper for the first time in a century and a half. How dare you say that to me, you ungrateful little filly? I loved your brother. I was protecting him, keeping him from the wretched aristocrats I have to tolerate all the time. Do you truly believe that I enjoyed disappointing him? I should... Mom? Auntie? Lestia? What's going on? We froze, and as one pony turned towards the little colt's voice, I did not yet know how strong and proud he would grow to be in time. His uncle all over again, blessing Equestria with a quiet, humble nobility that is all too rare in this sleeping age. For now, he is a golly little creature, awkward on his hooves at 5. Twinkle spares me one last look of pure disgust before turning a bright smile on her son. Well, see about the auntie, Shining. Now, off to bed. Mommy and Daddy have a lot they need to talk about to the princess. Shining Armor's little brows furrow. Don't yell, it's not nice, he declares, and with that he turns and marches off back to his room, proud as a prince. I cannot help but laugh, but it dies quickly under the baleful gaze of Twilight Twinkle. Nightlight clears his throat nervously. Well, I'm still not sure I understand, Princess. Surely you have more than enough. What I don't have enough of is time, I say, pointedly ignoring his wife's loathing stare. You've met my relatives, that colt, Blue Blood. I shake my head. I love my daughter. I do not want her to grow up pampered, waited upon, a society's creature. Then you should not have had her, Twinkle sniffs. I literally bite my tongue. I taste blood in my mouth. That filly, Cadence, she seems good enough, Nightlight says thoughtfully. Shining was playing with her all afternoon the other day. Mia Mora Cadenza is not typical for more than the immediate obvious reasons. Still, I think you would make a fine mother. I try to smile at Nightlight, who is nervously glancing at his wife. Any association with me, any attachment, makes Twilight Sparkle a target for ponies who will try to exploit her, who will try to use her to get to me or take advantage of her. Now, I don't mean this to be rude, but... Who is going to take advantage of a bookseller's daughter? Nightlight asked, grinning. I think I see now. Thank you, I say. I almost mean it. In the next room, Twilight Sparkle starts crying. I immediately regret not getting to my hooves instantly. I should have. I want to. So why don't I? Twilight Twinkle does. She raises from the table and begins to walk into the next room and pauses on the threshold. Ask me, she says simply, over the wail of the foals. Twinkle, honey, we should really talk this over with Shining. Light, I love you, but you need to shut up now. She turns, glaring at me. Say it. I feel myself swallow. Why is this so easy? Twilight, Twinkle, Nightlight, I say, looking to each of them in turn. Twinkle stares me down. Nightlight looks worried. Please raise my daughter, your niece, as your own foal. I can not. Spare me your damned speeches. Of course we'll take her, Twinkle says, snarling. I won't let you walk out of here with my brother's daughter if it killed me. Now get out of my house, and don't you dare darken my doorways again. I curse the day I met you. I regret ever calling you my friend. Get out. I raise, stiffly, breathing in and out, careful to calm myself. Nightlight accompanies me to the door. We walk silently, but he steps out with me onto the street, closing the door behind him. She's taking his death, pretty hard, he says. He's trying to be nice, play peacemaker, but he lacks the capacity for deep understanding necessary to play that role between two proud matrons. We all are. Forgive me for disturbing the peace of your household, Nightlight, I mutter, the old politeness reflexively, 300 years out of date. It confuses the young stallion. Dumb as a box of hammers, Twinkle used to say, but at least he looks good. But that was her way sometimes, being a bit unkind in her sarcasm. At worst, he is oblivious and can't read the mood, which are forgivable flaws. Innocent flaws. But it's outstanding how badly I wish he didn't have them right now. Oh, it's always a pleasure, he says, trying to be polite. I give him a hollowed smile in turn, wings spreading. She'll be happy here, I promise. I freeze. What should we tell her, I mean? I know that it will be a while, but... Tell her what I hope you will come to consider the truth, Nightlight. Tell her she is yours, I say, the words flowing from my mouth, easy as water over smooth stone. Tell her nothing of what her uncle was involved with. Make sure Shining understands what is expected of him. I am glad I can trust you to keep her happy, but... But what, you immense, cowardly, disgusting, vile traitor of a mare? Remember that I am doing this for her, I lie, and I know it. Keep her safe. Nightlight is silent for a very long time. Inside, Twilight Sparkle's cries have ceased. My mind tortures itself with memories of her happy coos, which she now makes in the forehoofs of a pony who hates me the most in all of Equestria, save perhaps the poor, lost creature sealed in the moon for the last 900-odd years. I turn to Nightlight. He is lost in thought, possibly for the first time in his life. He's a gentle soul at heart. A good soul, reliable, dependable, not the sharpest knife in any drawer, but... What if she takes after her mother at all? I don't think that's how it works, I begun, but he laughs. No, not the wings. If she's like her mother, or her father for that matter, she'll wander. Something will slip out and she'll notice. She'll be magical as the stars themselves, I have no doubt, and there is ways magic can whisper truths to you. I am very, very suddenly desperate. I turned to him, pleading, undoubtedly naked on my face. Please, someday she will learn the truth, but only when she is ready. And in that moment, I hope she is never ready, that I will never have to look my daughter in the face and watch as the truth dawns in her eyes, as the betrayal is laid naked before her. I try to compose myself. Until that time, keep your promise. Keep her happy. Happy ponies don't wander. And with that, I fly away, intending to never hear about Twilight Sparkle in anything but retrospect. I do not know that in a few short years I will look out into a crowd and see my own eyes looking back up at me. I have yet to had that long argument with Twilight Twinkle, where a proud mother tells me, a reluctant monarch, that there will be much more suspicion if her daughter, my daughter Celestia, don't you dare forget it, is denied entry to an academy that is risked by allowing her in. At least let her try. You owe her and her father much, much more than that. I do not know the circumstances in which I will hold my beautiful, perfect daughter in my hooves for the first time since she is a newborn. I do not know in that moment I will be unable to resist the need to reclaim what should have always been mine entire life, even if only as my personal protege. Let Twinkle rage at me. I know her well enough to know that deep down, in that moment, she wants this too. She will hate me, but she loves Twilight Sparkle enough that she is unwilling to keep her away from me. I know. I, who can give Twilight the world, teach her to build castles in the sky, even if I do so as her teacher rather than her mother. I do not know the sublime joy I'm going to feel being the one to draw my daughter's attention to her brand new cutie mark, an experience that every parent hopes just to be present for. I do not know she will instantly steal my heart, be more intelligent and dutiful and devoted than I could ever hope to wish, my faithful student. I do not know that I will make her a hero such that my beloved Equestria will never again know a time when the effects of her life won't be felt. But in this moment, I know for the very first time in shame and humiliation that will hammer me every time I read the words, Dear Princess Celestia, knowing that in a better, happier, all-too-imagined world, they simply read, Dear Mom. I am your what? Twilight asked, brows furrowing. Celestia blinked. Oh? She said, shaking her head. Well, there you are, Twilight. You are my what? They're all just words. Friends, teacher. I've been to you both, sometimes more one than the other. Just words, getting in the way of the truth, that we love each other. Twilight just smiled and cuddled into the welcoming embrace of the princess. Celestia squeezed her gently. Friends, teacher, student, mentor, protege, mother, daughter. Just words, Celestia murmured. And that is the end of our book. Just to reiterate, that was Just Words by Device Heretic. Please show the original author love, as a link to the fanfiction can be found in the description. Thank you, everybody, for listening this far. Please check out my other videos, and more will be on the way. I do not know when, as these are long to record and harder to edit, as I am very new at this, but more will be there. So, like, subscribe, and comment if you want anything read, or if you have anything that you think should be read. I do look at the comments, and I do take suggestions. So, have a nice Never After All, everybody.